obvious physical component of war is that we have desires. We want food, we want a nice home, and we also have ideas attached to those desires, how we should live, under what conditions is a good life possible, and also under what conditions is a good life impossible. And I think a lot of that is where imperialism comes from. This notion that we know better how somebody ought live than, for example, somebody in Iraq. We went there and we liberated. The presumption being that Saddam was a tyrant and that we're these great providers of liberty. And so there's an ideological aspect to war. There's also the material component, which I think everybody's become acutely aware of as more and more facts come out about the war in Iraq, how problematized it's become. I feel like that's one of the big underlying issues that's been constant throughout war. And there's this perception of, we have such a huge population, resources are getting smaller and smaller. But when you look at the history of warfare in general, that there's been that same concept driving it, that there's not enough.
Not enough what?
Of whatever material resource seems limited at the time.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Gold, ivory, opium in China. I mean, there's always these material underpinnings which seem to be driving all conflict. If there was no oil at this moment, just all of it suddenly evaporated, but things go through processes. It's not just this sudden absolute change. We don't just get cut off. And people will lose sight of that when they get these kind of ideas of the necessity of war. And it's not a good justification, because what it's really saying to me is that my way of life is more important than a human life. And that's just absolutely egregious to say that, I would rather somebody, one person, 1,000 people, 10,000 people, 1,000,000 people die so that I can maintain my standard of living. I'm still aware that there's a huge fight going on, an unspoken fight between all the huge world powers, India, China, America, Great Britain, Russia, France. I mean, everybody's fighting to control these basic natural resources, which we're going to need in the coming century, and which are becoming fewer and fewer and fewer as more and more people are using it. And this is just a step in the wrong direction. I take it to just live out every single day to be as non-compliant in this system of destruction, in this economy which continues to, I think, mutilate human connection, and as a result allow us to do horrible, horrible things to one another through war, through sweatshops, through just many forms of exploitation. So it's just living as austere a life as possible with as little luxuries, so I'm as least complicit as I can possibly be. And also trying to feel compassion for not only those who are fighting, or, not only for the terrorists, but not let that compassion blind me to also feel for people here at home, domestic fighters. And so I'm not an activist in the traditional sense, because I don't want my opinions to be construed that way, and I feel like it's way too reductive and of an argument, to go out shouting and protesting in that manner. But more, I feel like my everyday is a protest to human conflict on both a global and a personal scale, and to just really appreciate humans and all living creatures and respect their life.
That was really good soundbite. Just let you know.
Okay.
That'd probably be the last sentence you said in the video.